Hi everyone, good morning. Our meeting today is very exciting to get more information about 3D experience on management stuff, managing and controlling, software evaluation and with the change management. And also this is the second time that we have Matthew. He's an expert and he's the first person that I learned some new tips related to 3D experience. So it's kind of pleasure to have him again. Hi, Matthew. Nice to meet you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me again. Excited to be on.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I will give you the floor.
Excellent. Well, I'll go
Yep,
ahead and start off by sharing my screen.
yep,
And just to confirm, is everyone able to see?
yes.
Perfect. So, as mentioned, I'm going to be talking a little bit about change management today, more of the governance side of the 3D experience platform. This will be more of an overview of what it's capable of. You'll see a little bit of step by step of how things are done. But if this is more of interest, happy to pull together a more detailed session on the step by step of each individual section. So, starting off, what I'll be discussing today is different aspects of how the 3 experience platform can be used to manage kind of the overall change lifecycle. So we have the identify stage where you're identifying that there is a problem and in general with your model. Then you have the evaluate. Is it worth a change? How are we going to change it? Moving on to that plan stage, creating the detailed step by step of who's going to do it, when is it going to be done by, and how is it going to be done. And then the implementation is the actual change itself. You're going in, changing the model, sending it off to manufacturers, et cetera. Then you just loop through that cycle again as you're going through and changing and updating your models. Now, for anybody in any industries where this terminology may be used, I wanted to put the terminology side by side where identify is more that issue management, where you're identifying the issues themselves. Evaluate is more that change request, where you're evaluating whether or not you need to move forward with actual change. Change order is more that planning stage where you're going through and creating the actual step by step plan. And change action in the 3D experience platform is going to be more the implementation of it, going through making the changes to your models and sending those off to manufacturers. So today we're going to be taking a look at a miter saw here that has been receiving some reports about the lever breaking. So this is an issue that has been identified through customer reports where they are getting reports that before the warranty has expired, the lever is breaking. So in order to reduce this issue, we need to update this lever in the next product release. So I'm going to be taking a look at 3 different scenarios. One where we have no change management implemented whatsoever. Then the other 2 are going to be using the 3D experience platform. One being more so just simple approval routes, and the third one being more of a formal change where you have the sign offs and approval routes and everything integrated into that process. So starting off with no change management, this is where a lot of people tend to start. So here we have an email from myself to Jill Designer, who is on my team and designing the part, and just letting her know that we've been receiving reports of the lever breaking, and we need her to update this model in the next product release. And then I went ahead and attached that SolidWorks model to the email and just sent it off via email. Now, there's some issues with this. One being the issues of the details of the issue itself are very limited. I didn't really say where it's breaking, how it's breaking, how many people are experiencing it. It's very broad, just that it's breaking. And then the resolution is also very vague. I've just said to go ahead and fix it in the next product release. I didn't say how to fix it. And the file was sent via email, meaning that it's now disconnected. So this could result in duplicates because I'm now sending this file off, disconnecting it from wherever it was worked on prior. And if we take a look at what that email covered in this change lifecycle, just in that simple email, I identified that there was an issue. I decided that we were going to change it, and I gave Jill an action to go ahead and change it. So really kind of encompassing the identify, evaluate, plan just with a single email, which you typically want to break that up a little bit more. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on this first stage. I went ahead and just Jill went ahead and fixed it, sent it back to me via email. And in addition to this, Jill also sent it right to the manufacturer now that it's been fixed without me getting a second set of eyes on it. The problem with this is there was a lot of assumptions to account for the weak points. Again, she didn't really have any details on how it was breaking, and there was no check done on the updated model or documentation, which means that there could be something wrong with this and nobody would know until it's being manufactured, which can be very costly. And that's more or less the implementation side of things. So just to take a look and wrap up this section of the presentation here, if I jump in and was to review this model after Jill had finished the design, I can jump in and take a look. And from a first glance, it looks like it's fitting all right and does have more rigidity. But if I jump into my Evaluate tab of SolidWorks and use the interference detection and select the lever itself as well as the joint, and then calculate interference, I can see that there is indeed some interference here. And it turns out that the width was increased by too much, and now that component won't fit in there. So if we take a look at the impacts, Jill did a good job at preventing the breaks, happened to get the right places of adding rigidity, but it was updated without taking context of the assembly into consideration, which means she didn't test whether or not it would fit into the assembly once it was fixed. The upstream documentation was not updated, which means that the drawings and parent assemblies were not updated. And then the updated model was sent to the manufacturer without any approval, which means it's now being manufactured, and nobody had that second set of eyes on it, which means these small mistakes can make big impacts. There can be thousands of dollars used for an incorrect mold now that it's sent off to the manufacturer. We now have to spend extra time fixing it again, and there's further delays with all of these impacting together, creating delays in our product launch. So that's just to give you an idea of what happens if you don't have any management. I know that that's where a lot of people get started, but with the 3D Experience platform, there is a lot of tools in there that help prevent that from happening. And one of the first steps that I recommend is just using simple approval routes. So if we take a look at that first example, we have our communication is really important. Garbage in is garbage out. You need to have good feedback to promote positive results, and even better graphic feedback helps reduce those miscommunications. So if we look, a very common tool is PowerPoint, taking a lot of screenshots, putting it in PowerPoint, or e-drawings, sending a model via e-drawings and marking it up. With the 3D Experience platform, we can use what's called 3D markup. So as we jump in here, I am in the 3D Experience platform. I am in Bookmark Editor, which is kind of like the file explorer, and I have just opened up the lever in what's called 3D markup. And this is essentially a 3D PowerPoint tool that allows you to mark things up without taking the model out of the 3D environment. So I can name this whatever review document that I want to name it. It automatically saves it to cloud storage, accessible by anybody on the platform. And then you can still navigate the model between the normal views that you have in SolidWorks. And you click Update Viewpoint, and it basically updates a slide to what you're seeing on your screen. Update Viewpoint, it updates a slide to what you're seeing on your screen again. And then you can go ahead and mark this up. So this is just with a standard pencil tool, and you can give ideas of where this is going to break to give that contextual feedback and make sure that somebody is fixing that correctly. And this is all in a web browser. So this can be accessed via an iPad, for example, and you can go ahead and do these markups with a tablet and stylus, giving you additional flexibility. Then you can create a new slide, reposition, and then set that as the current view. And then you can go through and add markups, as many markups as you want, but it keeps it in that 3D context. So when somebody goes to review this and they don't necessarily understand what they're looking at, they can actually pan around, even though it's in that slide position, they can pan it around to see additional context. You can do section views, measurements, markups. If it's an assembly, you can explode the assembly out. You can hide components, all sorts of flexibility in how you're getting that feedback through this process. So if we take a look at the life cycle, just going through and having the issue reported and evaluating whether or not there should be a change, we're giving that feedback to Jill in a graphical format, evaluating and giving all of the detailed problems and issues in a detailed graphics drawing and handing it off to Jill. That covers that identify and evaluate stages. Now, if we take a look again at that last scenario, accountability is also very important. It's what gets projects over the finish line on time and provides clear direction otherwise. So having somebody understand that it's they're accountable for making sure that the project moves forward. If something's falling behind, they're going to be the one that that takes responsibility and goes through and creates a plan B. It also prevents things through slipping through the cracks, and it cuts down on the fog of where a project stands because it's that one single accountability person responsible for any given task. No he said she said where somebody thought they were supposed to be doing something or thought somebody else was supposed to be doing something. Very clear accountability. And in terms of 3D experience, that's where route management comes into play. So I am in the 3D experience platform once again in the route management tool. And if I click to create a new route, essentially what this is going to do is allow me to start doing a bit of a project plan, sending one task to somebody and then the next to another person, for example. So in this case, you can give an overall description of what the overall route's intention is. And in this case, it's to review the attached lever and reference the associated markup to determine any updated needs. And then you can go through update additional options. I won't dive too far into the options. There's plenty of tweaking and customization you can do to how a route works. In this case, we're going to leave it as standard, which means I can assign somebody something, and then another route or another task in the route can be an approval versus just a to do. So there's all sorts of customizations you can get into. And then I'll scroll back up and jump over to the content tab, and I'll jump tabs here to back to my bookmark editor, which again is kind of like File Explorer. And I'll drag that lever and attach it to this route. And then I'll be able to update the target maturity. And what this means, I'm setting it to released. What this does is once this route is completed, it will automatically take that file and release it for me. So it's streamlining that process as well. You don't have to lock things down once they're finalized. The route will do it for you. So now we can go through and create as many tasks as we want in this sequence. In this case, the first task I'm going to do is just updating the associated design. This is in place of that email, essentially. That in that first example, I sent off the email and it was attaching a file. This is replacing that and having more clear accountability. So we're setting up an assignee, details, we're assigning a due date as well. And then the content, the lever itself is attached as content. So it's not disconnected. It's just pointing right back to where it's actually stored on the data management system, preventing from any duplicate issues like that as well. And then once you have all of this defined, we can click apply, and it now has that set up where we can create the next task in the sequence. So in this case, I just want a second set of eyes on this before it's released. So in this case, I'm going to create a review approval task where I go through and assign myself an approval task to look at it before it is released. And like I said, the route will automatically release this component by the time it has completed all of the tasks within it. So I assign this one to myself, and then I can even add additional flexibility that once that last task is completed, let's assign this next one to be due within 1 day of that. And then I can go ahead and start the route. And what that's going to do is it's going to create this route and kick off that first task. And you can see there that that first task is now in to do, and Jill Designer has now been assigned that task. So that's kind of the plan side of that life cycle where we jump in, we take a look and create accountability, who's going to be doing it, how are they going to do it, and when are they going to be doing it. So now jumping over to the perspective of Jill Designer, Jill gets assigned this task and can see it in her collaborative tasks app, which is kind of like your overall task list on anything that is assigned to you will show up in this app. In this case, we can see that the content is attached and we can drag it right from that task right into SolidWorks. And this is not a disconnected copy. Again, this is pointing right back to the model that is saved to the 3D Experience platform. So you're preventing any chance of duplicate models there. Then we can go ahead and open up our 3D Experience task pane. And if we jump in here, we can jump into the relations tool. The task itself, if you remember, had a description stating that there is a markup associated with this. This relations tool can show where used in terms of SolidWorks, but it also can show beyond just SolidWorks relations. So if I choose all relations here, and I expand the parents of this model, I'm going to be able to see that it's a member of certain subassemblies. It has a drawing, but we can also see that it has a markup associated with it. And right from this area, I can open that markup up and review that for further context. And that will open up right in the web browser and load up all those slides just as I had shown in the creation, where I can jump between those slides and see the additional context. So now that Jill has that additional context, Jill can jump back into SolidWorks. We can close out of the relations dialog. We can go ahead and lock this component, which lets everybody else know that Jill is working on it. Nobody else can make any changes and save those changes. And then I'll go ahead and make those updates here and save those back to the 3D Experience platform through that 3D Experience task pane. And this saves it up to the cloud storage, backs it up, and makes it accessible for everybody else that has access in my organization to this part for review. So now that it's been saved, we can jump back to the perspective of myself. I'm back in my account here, and I'm back in that route management. Jill went ahead and completed that task, which means that it moved to the next task in that sequence, which was assigned to myself. So from the route management tool here, I can see that this is awaiting my approval. And for every route that exists, I can see that. Additionally, you can even have it so that as you're scrolling through your folders, you can see any parts that have approval waiting for you as well under the approval status column, which is really handy. It lets you know that you can just jump in right from that link and click on it, and it will open up the approval. Then you can see that it's this component. You can go through. You could open it up into a 3D viewer right in the web browser and start reviewing this. And this will allow you to get that contextual double check before you go through and release it. And in this case, from everything that I'm seeing as I'm looking at it, it looks good here. In this case, I know that it's part of an assembly, so I also want to check that assembly. So I'll go ahead and jump back to my folder here, and I'll scroll up to the top where that assembly is. And I'll go ahead and open this up into what's called Product Explorer. The last app that you saw was just a plain 3D view. The Product Explorer is similar, but it's a 3D view, the same 3D viewer you saw just a second ago, but also right next to it, it has the product structure itself. So just like you see in SolidWorks, you can expand that out and see the actual assembly structure and subassembly structure. In this case, I'm going to search for the component, and right from that, I can right-click, focus on, and it's going to zoom right in on the assembly for me. Meaning that even if you're somebody that's not super familiar with how the assembly is structured, you can still navigate it really efficiently. Now, as I'm reviewing here, I can see that obstruction here and that it's too wide. So this allows that double check for me to find before it even happens, before it's sent off to the manufacturer, that it's not going to work. And like I said, right from this tool, I can go ahead and select the different faces and pull actual measurements from this. Meaning that once I go through and see the actual measurement, I can give that feedback back to Jill now that I've determined that this will not work. So 27.5 millimeters is as far and wide as that can be. And of course, you want some tolerance as well. But at the very least, I need to tell Jill that the max width is going to be 27.5 millimeters. And then once that has been completed, you can see up in the top right, I have the option to approve. But next to that, there is a drop down. So once I've gone through, given all the notes I want to, you could also do another markup if you wanted to. You can get as complex as you want with this. But then I can go through, drop that down, and select reject. And what that's going to do is it's going to stop the route from moving forward. It's going to prevent that part from being released and sent off to any manufacturer. And then in this case, I just want to go ahead and restart this and send it back to Jill to make those requested updates. So now jumping back into the perspective of Jill Designer here, you can see that I have some notifications up in the top right. If I open that up, I can actually see the comments that it was rejected and why. And then you can, of course, go into the route and see those anytime you need outside of the notifications center. But in this case, it just requires going through, updating the part again, completing that task, which I won't go through. You saw that process, but it would just be repeating that that you saw with the original update. So once that has been completed, we're sending it back to myself for approval. I can jump in there. I already looked through it. It looks good. The gap has been updated to where it fits correctly. So I can give the approval comment and click approve. And what that's going to do is it's going to complete not only that task, but the overall route, which, if you recall, completing the route means that anything that's attached to that is now released automatically. So I'll go ahead and refresh my files here and scroll down to the lever. And you can see here, as I locate the lever, the status maturity state is released automatically. And this is now ready to send off to a manufacturer. So that's more that implementation side of things where you go through and actually make the changes. And that, in terms of what was used in that workflow, I just want to highlight there's a lot of different apps on the 3D Experience platform, and you start to learn where each one's being used. But as I was going through this, I wanted to highlight which ones are beneficial when you're getting into certain stages of your use. So starting off, Bookmark Editor is going to be useful for everybody in terms of organizing files into a folder-like structure. Some people like to work strictly off of a search basis, but a lot of people that I understand like to use the Bookmark Editor, keep that folder-like structure. Collaborative tasks was used to give an overall view of what tasks you have assigned and when they're due. 3D markup was used to give that contextual feedback back with the actual model in view. SolidWorks Connected was used to make the updates to the actual model itself. Route management was used to set up the series of tasks that were automatically transferred from one to another. And then Product Explorer was used to analyze the 3D view next to the actual product structure that is as is in SolidWorks. So that's just the simple approval routes. At the very least, that helps get somebody a second set of eyes on it, which is very important to make sure that you have that security in releasing things and make sure that you don't send things off prior to approval. So in terms of the next stage, once you're outgrowing that and you need additional level of control, we can get into some more formal change capabilities with the 3D Experience platform. So in terms of when this is needed, if you need more history and collaboration of tracking, in terms of the reported issues, this will help. This next demonstration will help. The higher level of control of who can work on any given change is very important. So if you have a large team and you only can have one person working on a certain change, this additional level of control will be helpful. This will also stop people from making unwanted and unauthorized changes, and they have to be approved to make any changes whatsoever. And then it also just gives you a better history of change documentation with any revision of a part. So as you're increasing the revision of a part, each sign off and approval and the historical documentation is all stored automatically through this next process. So jumping into the 3D Experience platform, we're starting off in the perspective of Jill Designer. She has the issue apps, issue management and issue 3D review side by side here. And these are going to allow any reported issues to be tracked. So in this case, she's getting phone calls about the lever breaking from the warranty prior to the warranty expiring. So we can go ahead and create a new issue. In this case, we can add as many or as few details as you'd like. At the very least, you do need to add a title, but then we can go through and add a description of how this issue is being reported. You can give a recommended resolution of how you think it should be fixed, or you can leave that blank as needed. And then you can also choose additional information such as priority level. You need to get on this right away, or additional due dates, etc. Now, as we're going through, I have it filtered for just this miter saw currently, but you can track issues on every single component that you have saved, and it will show the entire list on that left pane there. It will show the entire list of all issues within your organization. As we jump into the contents tab, we can choose this pin icon, and we can actually choose it right from the 3D view of what part the issue is with. And you can see that it also pulled in the top level assembly as the context, because we chose that lever in the context of this assembly. So we need to make sure that it works in the assembly once the issue is resolved as well. We can add additional attachments if we want, customer reports or specification documents, etc. And then Jill is going to assign me as the owner of this, which means I'm going to be responsible for looking and seeing if this is worthy of a change. Once an issue is created, you can always double click on the issue and you'll be able to review all of the information that we just added through that creation process. And you'll see that the to-do status is highlighted in red. The pin in the 3D model is also red. So these pins are color coded to the status of the issue itself, giving you a really quick view. Once you get multiple issues on the board, gives you a really quick view of where each issue is. So this is really starting to break it down. So this is just identifying the issue, keeping that segregated just to that individual application. So now we need to determine whether that's worthy of a change. And now we're jumping back over to my own account here and taking a look. I can see this issue as well because I've been assigned as the owner of this issue, which means I need to determine if it's worthy of a change. As I take a look at this, I can see why it's an issue, why it's weak, and that it is worthy of an update. So with this, I can click add this new change action as a resolved by, which means this is going to take that next level of control with change actions, and it's going to drive this issue through the life cycle based on this change. And you'll see here in a moment what that means. So as I create this change action, I can update the details if I want. It does automatically pull details from the issue that was already created. And then I'm going to choose to save this as a draft. So as I save this as a draft, I jump over to my change execution, and that's where I can see all current changes that are being undergone in my organization. And in this case, it is still a draft, and that's just because I want to make it a couple of updates prior to me proceeding. The first update, I need to add additional members. So in terms of assignees, this is going to be anybody who can access this part while it's under change, and it's restricted to only assignees. So in this case, I only want Jill Designer to be able to edit this while it's under change. And then for the approver, you can choose individual people, or you can take one of those routes that we created and you can templatize it and use it over and over again as an approval route through this change action. Proposed changes, since we have the issue attached to that lever, it automatically pulls that in, recognizing that that part is going to need to change with this change action. So you can see the operation there is to modify it. And then by the time this change action is approved, it's going to release it. Similar to how that worked with approval routes. Also, we can jump into a change assessment, which is really important when it comes to getting into larger assemblies, more complex structures. Once you change a part, you may not have a good perspective of how big of an impact that's really going to have. So if I change this part and I look at all the parents in this relational explorer, I realize that I'm not just going to have to change that part. I'm going to have to confirm that it works in the subassembly, the main assembly. I'm going to have to update the drawing for the part, the drawing for the subassembly, the drawing for the main assembly with different revision information. So there's a lot bigger of an impact than you may originally anticipate, and that may help determine whether or not you're actually going to make a change or not. So in this case, we don't have those attached to the change, but they're going to need to be changed. So I can actually just control select all the individual components that were not selected originally and drag those in as well. Then you can add as much information as you want to each one of these individual parts. So if you want to give a list by list breakdown of exactly what needs to be done, you can do that, but it's not required. You can carry on communication as much through the platform or as little through the platform as you'd like. So now we can see that that issue is still in a to-do state. Now that we have all the parts added to this, we're going to go ahead and set this change to in work and move things along. So if we jump back over to the issue tracking and give that a refresh, we'll notice that the issue itself has automatically updated to in work, and the pin will follow shortly behind it in the blue color. But with the in work being driven automatically by that change action moving forward, it will do the same thing once we get to an approval and approved. So as we take a look at that, we evaluated that it does need a change, and we've started a plan and assigned a due date, who it's going to be done by, what parts are going to be changed, and how they're going to be changed. So now, jumping back over into the perspective of Jill Designer here, Jill can also access this change execution area and open up this change action and see the entire report of what needs to be done. Now, Jill might not have been as privy to all the details. So as she goes into the information panel, she can see all of the relational information, any pinned issues. Again, this came from an issue, so it was automatically added as a pinned issue. She could go and open that if she wasn't privy to that issue to begin with to get more context. She can look at attachments, all sorts of additional information. Again, as much as you need to use that, you can, or you can carry on communication through a way that you may already have established. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the lever, and I can update the proposal status to show that it is started and we have begun work on this. So to start things off, we can drag it right from that change execution right into SolidWorks, and it will open up that model. And again, this is, again, not a disconnected copy. This is saved right to the 3D Experience platform. So no duplicates. You're just opening it right from the data management system, all cloud storage. So anybody can be opening it from anywhere without having to set up a VPN or setting up a server or anything. So in this case, we'll go ahead and open up the 3D Experience task pane and just setting that to unlock to show that I may have been working on it before. I can unlock it, but I'm going to go ahead and relock it now that I'm going to start work on it. Now, in terms of making the change, I won't show the actual model changes again. We know what changes need to be made, so I'll zoom forward with that. And then as we saw last time, I was able to save from here. Now that it's under a change action, if I attempt to save this time, it's actually going to block me saying locked by action, and then it's going to say the name of the change action, and it'll have the save icon grayed out. So I actually have to cancel. And the reason behind this is I actually have to turn on what's called work under. And this is going to be tracking those changes a little bit more closely. I'm only going to be able to see change actions that I'm an assignee to here. And that, in that sense, it prevents me from accidentally working on the wrong change or the wrong person working on this change. So once I assign this work under, I can go ahead and click save. And now I can proceed with the save as expected. And I'll go ahead and choose to unlock the files after saving, which means that it's going to release that for somebody else to lock and make changes to as well, as long as they're an assignee under the change action, which in this case, Jill is the only one. So Jill is the only one that can make changes to this at this time. So now that the save has been completed, Jill can jump back into the web browser and set that, refresh the application itself to show the latest information. And on the realized changes, we can now see that it's been tracked, that the lever has been updated and modified. And we can still see the maturity state here, and we can add notes on what's happened if we want. But as a default, it tracks automatically that it's been modified, letting you know that you can compare it to a previous version if desired. So jumping back into SolidWorks, we can jump into the maturity state and go ahead and freeze this. And what this is going to do is it's going to let both the system as well as anybody else that accesses the system know that this is ready for approval, and stop anybody from making any changes to it as well. So again, if we refresh this, we can get the latest status on this shown in the change action. And not only can we see that it's been modified, we can see each time that the maturity state is changed as well. So we can see that the maturity state was changed to frozen, and it looks like it still has not yet quite updated in the maturity state column, but that will follow shortly after. Now we can go ahead and update the proposal status and set that to complete. Now, if we jump in here to the realized changes, we can go through, finish the changes on everything else. We've completed, I just skipped ahead. I won't show the actual updates to all the drawings and the individual assemblies. We can see all of them right here. If we go to set this to in approval, it will actually block us. And this is because not everything is in a frozen state. So you saw me switch that lever to a frozen state. That's actually required for things to be moved to in approval, which gives you that added level of control to make sure that nobody's working on anything while it's under approval. So it looks like that top level assembly is the one that was not yet moved to a frozen state. So we can go ahead and freeze this as well. And now, once that's frozen, we can jump back over to the web browser environment, refresh it, and we can see now that everything is in that frozen state. And with everything in the frozen state, we can move this to in approval. Now, if you recall, the approver of this change action was actually a route, not an individual person. So now that this approver has gone through and activated, if we jump over to the approvals tab, we can see that it's actually a route that was kicked off. And in this case, again, you can templatize those routes that we created earlier to have consistent approvals that are kicked off when a change action is completed. In this case, it's multiple people in parallel are notified that there is an approval waiting on them. And in this case, to the left of those tasks, you can see a small any command. And any means that if either of those people approve it, it will move forward. You could also set it to be all, where both of them have to approve it. So you have a flexibility in how you want to go through the approvals on the 3D Experience platform as well. So jumping back over to the perspective of myself, I am one of those approvers here. So I was notified that there is a task available for me to review and approve. In this case, I won't go through the overall approval of it. I've already gone through and confirmed that it looks good. If I had found any issues with this, I could do a similar thing that we did with the routes and reject it if I wanted to, and then restart it if needed. But in this case, we've seen a similar process already. I'll go ahead and approve it. And what that's going to do is it's going to go through and not only complete the change action, not only complete the route, but also release everything that's attached to it. So now we're not only releasing the lever, we're also releasing the subassembly, the main assembly, the drawings, everything that was attached to this change action has now been released through the automation done on the back end of this system. So if we jump over to the realized changes, and we can see that the maturity state column usually takes a minute to update, but the change details is there. You can see the maturity state was set to released for all of those individual components. And with a quick refresh here, you can see that it has propagated over to the maturity state column as well. And we can see graphically. So now all of those are released, which means nobody can make any changes on those unless a new revision is created and that historical documentation is stored, keeping everything secure. And then if we jump back over to the issues management, we can see that that was automatically brought to an approval as well. So that gives you one last chance to make sure that the change that was done by the change action actually solved the issue. And you can see that that pin has been updated in color as well. In this case, I know that it resolved the issue, so I can go ahead and just manually kick this issue over to completed. So that's the kind of that full life cycle of tracking the issue, evaluating whether it needs to or not, creating that change action, creating the plan, adding the details to the change action, and then implementing by going through, working under the change action, and completing the issue as well. So if we take a look at what apps were used in this workflow, the issue management and issue 3D review were two different apps, but side by side. I often use those side by side, allowing me to track in a list view as well as in a graphical representation of the 3D model where the issue is. Then we also used the relations tool to dive into a where used analysis in terms of finding those parents that are going to be affected by a change. And then we use the change execution tool, which is going to track all current changes in your organization that you have access to. So that is more along the lines of a simple formal change. This solution is as scalable as you want it to be. That is, everything mentioned so far has been available with the default access to the 3D Experience platform that comes with SolidWorks licenses now. So just all you need is either 3D Experience SolidWorks or Collaborative Designer for SolidWorks, and you would have all of those capabilities that you saw. If you need even more formal change, where you have multiple layers of approvals, then you can get into an add-on that's called Change Manager. And that's going to allow you to take it one step further. So I won't go through the whole demonstration, but I'll show you kind of a diagram of how that would work. So we started off with our issue, and that's in that draft state. If you jump over to a change request instead of a change action, this is going to be more evaluation of whether or not you even want to. You have to have an approval board approve before moving forward with the change at all. At this case, both of these are in a draft state. Now we begin work on the change request, meaning that multiple people are adding details to this change request. And then we go through, once the details are added in terms of what the change is going to be, what it's going to impact, how it's going to be done, we can move that to in approval. And that gets sent off to a change board. Generally at a larger organization, they have a change board where they'll sign off on moving forward with changes like this. Once the change request is approved, it creates a change order automatically. And this is kind of that next layer. And these two things here are not are not included with what I've shown so far. They're the added layers of approvals. So with that change order, it's going to be going through and actually creating the individual actions that need to be done. And we can see here, as that change request was approved and a change order was created, that issue is automatically moved to in work. But everything else is still in a draft state, meaning the change order and the change actions. You can have as many change actions under a change order as you'd like. And generally, these are departmental. So you might want to have the engineering department make some change and they sign off on their own change, but it's not finalizing the change for everyone. Then the manufacturing department might want to make their own changes. They sign off on their own changes, but again, it's not finalizing the changes for everyone. So as we move the first change action to in work, the change order will automatically follow along. So now that change order is in work as well. You can work on individual change actions while leaving the others for later. So for example, the engineering team, they go through, they work on theirs, then they kick theirs to in approval. Then the manufacturing, once there's engineering departments in approval, the manufacturing department starts work on their changes. Then they kick theirs into an approval. Once the individual change actions are approved, what we saw before was it automatically completed and released everything. If a change action is under a change order, once it's approved, what it does is it waits for all of the change actions to be approved, and then it kicks the change order to in approval. And once that gets approved, then it completes everything underneath it automatically. So it gives you that additional layer of segmenting the individual approvals. And then we have the change request get approved. That moves the issue to in approval, and then you can complete that issue. So similar workflow that you saw with the simple formal change, but it just added layers of approvals if you need that additional complexity. So again, this is really just scalable to your needs. Everything you saw except for that last diagram is available with the base level access to the platform. So if you have access to the 3D Experience platform, even if through the Makers program, you can get in, start playing with those tools to understand how they could affect any future potential career or your current career as well. So just again, highlight of that diagram in terms of scalability. You can even have multiple change orders under a change request with multiple change actions underneath each one. So it's very scalable in terms of how complex you need your approvals to be, but you can also keep it as simple as possible with just at the very minimum getting 2 sets of eyes onto something with an approval route. So with that, that covers my formal change. In terms of where to get started, I like to break this down for people because, like I said, there's a lot of different apps on the 3D Experience platform. Sometimes it's hard to know where to even start. So in terms of where I would recommend is step number 1, if you're a SolidWorks user, understand how to save your data to the platform. And the main 2 things are going to be SolidWorks Connected and Bookmark Editor. SolidWorks Connected is the 3D Experience SolidWorks package. If you're familiar with any of the terminology and you have Collaborative Designer for SolidWorks, that is same thing. So that's just if you have a standalone license of SolidWorks already and you got the add-in for 3D Experience into that versus having it pre-installed with SolidWorks Connected. Same thing. Understand how to take your SolidWorks data and save it into the platform. And then Bookmark Editor, you don't have to use this, but it helps organize it into that traditional folder-like structure, which I find really helps people adapt to the platform a little bit better. Number 2, manual lifecycle management. What I mean by that is just understand how to go through and move something to frozen. Understand how to release something manually without an approval route so that you have kind of that understanding of how the mechanism works in the background. This, again, can be done right from SolidWorks, or it can be done right from within Bookmark Editor. Now, once you have that, then I recommend getting into some of those approval routes where you have some of that moving along and automating things in the background. So we have the route management tool, and then we have collaborative tasks to keep an eye on what tasks you have assigned to you at any given moment. And then the relations tool, I just threw this in there because I think that it's important that once you start getting into creating your routes, that you have an understanding of the impacts even before you get into the higher level change management. So using that relations tool to understand how your change is going to impact something higher up is very important as soon as possible. Then we have exploring the collaborative capabilities. Once you have an understanding of how to pull those routes together, then you can add additional context with tools such as 3D Markup and Product Explorer. This allows you to jump in and traditionally if you need to, if you, in the meantime, if you need to use PowerPoint and screenshots, you can. Once you've understood how to put together the routes, then you can take those out of the equation and keep everything tied into the same system, making it really streamlined. And then step number 5, track your issues. So this is using the issue management and issue 3D review tools, where you get in, start pinning your issues. And then in the meantime, before you get into the formal change, you can still use issue management alongside approval routes, where you're manually tracking your issues and then creating approval routes based off of what changes need to be done with those issues. And then once you're comfortable with all of those things, then you can get into that more formal change where you're going through having sign-offs and different layers of approvals. So with that, that is all I have for today. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Let's see. So looks like there's 2 questions. Badri, not quite sure what course you're referring to. So if you want to clarify while I'm jumping into the next question, I'm happy to answer that in terms of the course certified question. In terms of the next question, so let's see. Do you think this app embedded in 3D Experience will have, okay, so desktop PDM. So this is very important to consider. Like you said, if you're not yet into a PDM system, it's best to choose which one you're going to be. As of now, there's no plans to replace desktop PDM, but this is the way of the future in terms of flexibility and added capabilities. In terms of the amount of resources that are being put into the 3D Experience platform, it's moving at an incredible pace. So before investing in desktop PDM, I would at the very least recommend getting in, even if it's just with the Makers program, and playing around with a 3D Experience system to see if it meets your needs. Because there's going to be a lot of capabilities being added to the 3D Experience platform at a lot faster rate than with PDM moving forward. Like I said, there's no plans to displace desktop PDM, but they are moving at different paces. So I would recommend at least getting in, playing around with the 3D Experience capabilities, and seeing if they fit your needs before investing in the hardware that's needed for the desktop PDM systems.
Hey, thank you, Matt.
Happy to answer any other questions.
If anyone got a question, feel free to ask. All right, so we're gonna wrap up the meeting. Thank you so much, Matthew, again for the informative presentation. So the meeting is gonna be recorded. So if you miss any information, so you're gonna find it in the YouTube channel. And also, if you got any question, I'll make sure to send it to Matthew to answer it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Yeah, appreciate it. So see you guys to the next meeting. So make sure to join. It's about the 3rd year anniversary. So we got also like a free certification opportunity. So thanks again, Matthew, and thank you all for tuning in, and see you in the next meeting.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.